Velma Brinkley. Probably don't need to introduce her, but I have memorized 4 lines, so I have. She is a retired teacher, and teachers never retire, they always keep teaching. And she is a published author and a church historian. She has published 6 books and is a church historian. And did I get everything? Was that the?
That's everything. Snippets of history.
And tonight, last time she talked about individuals, and we all enjoyed that, but tonight, she's just going to do little snippets of history as they appear, okay, of Black history and throughout the state.
Well, no, they are local.
Yeah, that's tied in here.
Yeah, they're locals.
Okay.
Thank you. Thank you. I want to thank all of you for giving up an hour, coming to share it with me, and I hope you will leave not disappointed.
Right.
But if you do, I'm sorry. At any rate, last year we talked about Reverend Hillary Key, who was the founder of Key Stewart United Methodist Church on Blythe Street, and 7 more from east to west Tennessee. And of course, he lost a part of his farm on the last church he built in Memphis, Tennessee. He mortgaged and lost 300 acres and was left with 300 acres. I am in contact with his 2 grandsons and have a wonderful, wonderful relationship with his grandson in LA.
All right.
At any rate, this year I decided not to spend the whole time on one person. I want to do snippets, so I'm going to introduce you to more than one tonight, if all goes well. Okay, the image that you see on the screen is Calvary Baptist Church in Oklahoma City. It had its beginning right here in Sumner County, when families from 3 communities decided that the territory of Oklahoma was fertile for farming and fertile for freedom from Jim Crow laws. So families from Castellium Springs, Gallatin, and Durham's Chapel banded together and headed to the territory of Oklahoma, because the people that were there were simply minding their own business, trying to stay away from the Indians, saving their scalps, and trying to farm and claiming land. So they headed out there and did fine. Among those families that left Middle Tennessee or left Sumner County were John Rogan, Isaac Holmes, John Tyree, Samuel Horton, to name a few. Those were among the many who headed out there. I do not use one of these at home. Okay, I think I'm going to manage it. I don't care for a mouse. Haven't used one in quite a few years, but at any rate, I shall try tonight. The trip was to the territory was a very long and hard trip. And on their way, they started having prayer service and Bible teaching. And they actually loosely organized the church with W.M. Sulcer, S-U-L-C-E-R, recording everything that they did from a religious perspective. He didn't count how many times they washed clothes or all of that, but everything that they did from a religious perspective, he recorded who, what, when, where, how, and why. Okay, This is a different view of that first image, and as you can see, it is 3 levels, and I actually do believe, I've been all through it, I do believe there was a basement underneath it. After they got there and worshiped, they eventually decided that they needed to officially organize. So in 1890, they got a white brethren to come and help them organize and become incorporated. And till this day, incorporated is still a part of their name.
You just closed it.
Aha. Remember I said that Isaac Holmes was one of those? This historic church has a window dedicated to each of the original families. See, his name is there, W.M. Sulzer. This is the one who did all of the writing, the recording, on the way and after they arrived there. W.M. Sulzer and wife. This is difficult to understand, but that, when you're in the sanctuary of that church, that is the actual ceiling itself. That is a part in the center of the ceiling. And it is absolutely gorgeous, the stained glass. On the day that I was there, it was quite overcast, and I was not able to get a very good picture. This church moved from the time that it was established officially in 1890. It moved twice, and each time they moved, they changed the name. Well, in 1923, they moved to this location, Walnut Street, and they moved and named themselves Calvary Baptist Church Incorporated. And that is what they are today. Okay, all was going well with Calvary Baptist Church Incorporated until Timothy McVeigh arrived in Oklahoma City on April 19, 1995, when he parked a Ryder truck on the street right by the federal building. On the lower level was a daycare, and federal employees filled this building. And Timothy McVeigh's bomb, as you probably remember, killed 168 people, and it injured severely 700 more. Calvary Church is close by. It is right downtown. It's near the federal building. And the church sustained, because of its height, it sustained quite, and the stained glass windows. My church has what appears to be stained glass windows, but they are not. They are much thicker. Our windows are an inch thick. Stained glass windows are not. They are thin. So Calvary suffered a lot of damage because of that, because of the bombing. The federal government did not give the 700 injured and the families of the nearly 200 dead a single nickel. The only thing that the federal government did, to my knowledge, is give them a 2-year reprieve from tax paying. And that's it. So they suffered. I have relatives in the area, which is why I am there occasionally. It really was a traumatic occurrence, and still is. I often think of the janitor. This is the little year-old baby. This is the symbol of that occurrence. The chief, fire chief, is carrying a year and a half old little girl, Bailey, out of the wreckage. And that became the symbol of what happened there. The federal government did give Calvary Baptist $1.4 million. Calvary added in their insurance and money from their treasury, and they were determined, we are going to stay on this corner. And they spent over $2 million getting their church put back together, but they are still on that corner, worshiping God just as they did before all of the carnage. Now, okay, third adult from the left is Nora Turner Bate. And the name Turner in education circles is familiar. Andrew Turner from Rucker Stewart, they are cousins. At any rate, Nora Turner Bate is the mother to this little fireball standing here, Ola Mae Robertson.
Oh my goodness.
Well, this is Ola Mae's mother, and I shall speak about Nora Turner Bate, because if you thought Ola Robertson was a whippersnapper, wait until you hear about her mother. Her mother was born in the northern hills of Charleston County, and at the age when Nora was 5 years old, her mother died. Nora was next to the youngest of 8 children, so the father was suddenly left with 8 children, a 5-year-old and one even younger. And I am sure that that was not pretty. At any rate, 7 years after her mother's death, for whatever reason, Nora never said. Perhaps she never knew. And I'm sure she didn't know, because she had a way of telling it like it was. It didn't matter whether it was on you or on her. She told the truth the way she saw it. So at any rate, she never laid blame to him for it, but he decided to stop housekeeping 7 years after his wife died. He did not let the children go to DCS, if they had DCS back then, I don't know. He found a location for each of his children, and he placed each one with a blood relative. Nora Turner, he placed with her oldest sister, Nancy, Nancy's husband, and Nancy's 2 small children. By now, Ola was 12 years of age. And by all accounts, she was very bright, even as a young girl. She wrote her own autobiography. She wrote her own funeral program 5 or 6 years before she needed it. But she said, why would I wait for someone else to write it? They don't know as much about me as I know about myself. And you know, I think that makes a lot of sense, which is why I have written mine. But at any rate, in her autobiography, she says that she started to school at 5, and she did not like school, neither did she like her teacher. And she says, whose name was Frank Gregory. She didn't want there to be any misunderstanding as to who it was she did not like. It was Frank Gregory that she did not like. She says that when she was 5 and started to school, she soon learned to read well, count, and spell. She said she read every book in the school, from fairy tales to the Bible. There was a Bible because you had to have devotion. And I regret that there aren't Bibles in every room in this country now. But at any rate, she says when she got bored, she read the Bible because she had a thirst for knowledge, and she just read. After her 16th birthday, her father passed away, and in the same year, she was made superintendent of Sunday school. And she was a Sunday school teacher starting at 16 years of age, and she taught Sunday school until she died. At Hickory Grove Baptist Church, which is the little church on Hartsville Pike that goes through Castellian Springs, the little church there on the right, that is Hickory Grove. That is where she spent most of her adult years. She did some interesting things. She organized a missionary society in 1930, she said, because they didn't have one. Later on in 1936, she organized a choir, and she became the church pianist. And I'm trying to think, when did she learn to play a piano? She forgot to tell us that. But she became the pianist with the church choir. She made the women at the church meet together during the weekdays, and they would cook large meals to feed orphans. And I was thinking, orphans in Castellian Springs? And I thought, I guess there were. She said it. And she had the women to sew clothing for the needy children in the community. In 1900, Nora graduated high school from Roger Williams University in Nashville, Tennessee. Roger Williams University stood where, what is the teacher's college?
Peabody. Peabody.
Peabody. Yes, thank you. Roger Williams stood where Peabody later stood before Vanderbilt. Peabody became Vanderbilt. But at any rate, that is where she finished high school as class valedictorian. She was the first class valedictorian from African-American from Sumner County, because Sumner County did not have a high school for African-Americans in 1900. So Sumner Countyans, to get an education beyond 8th grade, had to go to a boarding school, which is what she did. She stayed in the dormitory, and or live with a relative in the city, Nashville, and go to school, either Pearl High School or Tennessee A&I, Agricultural and Industrial, or Roger Williams or Walden. They had to do one or the other. But at any rate, she was at Roger Williams. And I meant to bring her catalog. You know, colleges don't print catalogs anymore. But I still have her catalog of the classes that she took. And her catalog, there were so few graduates, every class was listed in the back of that catalog. It is really a neat thing that I have that was hers. And this is another neat thing that she did. She wrote poems. And when I was cleaning out the house, getting ready for Alan to come in to, conduct the auction for her daughter, Ola, everywhere I looked, I would find a poem on a cornflake box, inside a flour, a flour bag. There were poems on everything. So I put 2 boxes in the floor, and I wrote on each side poems. And then on the other box, I wrote keys. And the guys that Alan hired knew to drop anything that looked like a poem in the poem box and da-da-da-da. So when everything was settled and I had Miss Ola in the assisted living, I gathered them all together and contacted her children and asked, she had 3 children, asked the 3 of them, what shall we do with her poetry? And her son, who is a medical doctor, says, why, Velma, are they any good? He should not have asked a mother of history if his mother's poems were of any good. I don't think in heaven he'll ask anybody that question. So when the conversation ended, he said, well, Velma, I'll tell you what. You just go ahead and publish them, and the 3 of us will pay for it. I said, okay, now that sounds like a winner. And that is exactly what I did, was publish their mom's book of poetry. At any rate, she was very small, very petite, but she carried a big stick. She had a sharp tongue. She really didn't mean any disrespect, but she just called things the way she saw them. She and the superintendent, T.W. Hunter, most of you remember Mr. Hunter, had a renowned fight. She was the only, in 1922, the state instituted a teacher examination. I don't know about the other teachers, Caucasian teachers, but African-American teachers had to pass that state mandated exam. And that summer, if you were going to teach that fall, you had to take the exam. She went and took the exam. She says it was fairly easy for her, and she passed. But when she got back home and started asking around, to her dismay, she learned that she was the only African-American from Sumner County to pass the state-mandated exam. And she said it really hurt her because she was being paid Negro teachers' pay, and the other African-American teachers were being paid African-American substitute teachers' pay, which is to say it was nothing. So at any rate, she helped tutor them, and eventually they all were able to pass the exam. So in the meantime, she was the only certified African-American teacher in Sumner County. So she put in a request to Mr. T.W. Hunter that she wanted to teach at a certain school out in her hometown, Castellan Springs. And a black man that she did not know, nor did anybody in the community know, appeared as the teacher. And she thought, he is not certified. How can Mr. Hunter bring in someone from out of county? And of course, we educators know what that's all about. You know, you rub my back, I'll scratch yours. So apparently he was doing someone in an adjacent county a favor and took someone that they wanted to have a job and gave it to him. And she was sitting there as a certified teacher and was going to have to drive halfway across the county. And of course, she was riding a white horse. I'm serious, she rode a white horse to school. Oh. Yes, she was going to have to ride that white horse further than she would have had to do right in her home. Wow. That didn't make sense to her. So she was quick to tell that to the superintendent, and he really didn't care because he had done a friend a favor, and that was the end of it. So she says, well, I know what I can do. I'll just open middle school. Mr. Hunter says, no, I forbid you from opening a school, Nora. And she says, well, I see. When school opened that Sunday, she announced at the church, Mr. XYZ will be teaching at the schoolhouse. I am opening my school right here in the church. You have a choice. Send your child wherever you want your child to go. Monday morning, Nora had 50 students in grades 1 through 8. And the male non-certified teacher had 5. In some 5 grades, 1 through 8, or they may have all been in the same grade, I don't know. So, and of course the superintendent was very distressed, but she did not care. She kept teaching, and finally the superintendent said, well, where are you getting your money? How are those people paying you? She said, oh, they're not. I'm teaching free. And she was. She taught the first month of school free for 50 students. So after that first month, Mr. Hunter gave in, put her in the school building, and she says she doesn't know what happened to that male teacher. I don't really think she cared about what happened to him. But interestingly enough, over the years, she and Mr. Hunter became good friends. When he realized how very brilliant she was, and secondly, she was a godly woman, and he appreciated both of those aspects of her life. At any rate, when Mr. Hunter needed a standardized test for the county, who did he contact to do it in secrecy? Under the cloak, and that's how she said it, was how he expressed it to her. Under the cloak of secrecy, he needed her to come by his office. Now, if you're around a big white horse, how do you how cloaking and secret can that be? She rode the big white horse into his office, and he explained how it had to be kept quiet. And it had to be kept quiet because that was his job. He's supposed to have made up the test. No teacher was supposed to make up the test, but he had her to make the test that the black and white kids all over the county would be taking. And she said she kept that secret until death. And I thought, no, you didn't. You left it in writing. Oh my goodness. At any rate, another thing Nora Turner did, she would not let her children or their children go to school under her husband. Her husband, Charlie Brimage Bate, was the first African-American college graduate from all of Sumner County. But she still would let those children go to school to him. He had a college degree, and she was teaching, she was certified, of course, with a high school diploma. But she would not let those 3 children go to school under him. She said that he was good in history, and she did not want her children good in history. She wanted them to be good in English, Latin, and math. So guess who taught those kids in grades 1 through 8? She did. They had to go to school with her instead of going to the school with their daddy. Her oldest child, Ola, became a high school math teacher. The second oldest, Charlie James, became a medical doctor in Tulsa, Oklahoma. And the baby, Wilbur, became a university professor at FAMU in Tallahassee, Florida. Actually, Wilbur still lives.
Wow.
He and his wife are in an assisted living on different floors. She does have dementia. So at any rate, I shall never forget something else she did. She went to a store in Gallatin, and I don't have any clue what store it was, but she wanted to buy a coat, and she was about to try the coat on, but you know what the rules were at that time. The clerk told her, "Oh, Nora, you can't try that coat on." She says, "I'll hold it up to you to see if it's wide enough for your shoulders, but you can't try it on." She says, "Oh, then I won't buy it. I have never bought a pig in a poke, and I certainly won't buy a coat in a poke." Whatever that means. At any rate, her life was full of firsts. She was the first high school valedictorian graduate in 1900. She was the first to pass the state teacher's license exam. Thirdly, she married the first African-American male college graduate from Sumner County in 1901. And her daughter was the first female college graduate, Ola, in 1925. And she compiled Nuggets of Gold, a book of poetry. And her favorite saying was something that I find myself saying: "All is well that ends well." That kind of is something that I like. Okay. Oh, this is her husband, Charles Brimage Bate. Incidentally, do you know the connection between the black Bate family from Castellian and the white Bate family? He is the youngest son of Marcus Bate. And Marcus Bate, who is mulatto, is the half-brother to General Bate, the white Bate. And they know that they are connected, and they acknowledge it with seemingly a great deal of interest. Julia Tyree called me one night just in a panic. I said, "What is wrong?" She said, "I have lost Nora's book, Nuggets of Gold, and I am just so sick." I said, "How did you lose it?" She said, "The storm blew everything away." I said, "And you were worried about a book?"
That's right.
I said, "Be at ease, honey. I have another Nuggets of Gold for you." And Julia Tyree told me something funny, that when his sister, who had worked for them all of Julia Tyree's life, died, what is her name? Aunt Nina. Julia was at her, it appears as though she was about 14 or 15, and she was at her funeral, and she said, "I just loved her." And she was crying, and she was crying. Finally, Ola had enough of that crying, and Ola went to her and said, "Julia, you need to stop crying." And Julia said she couldn't. She was just crying. Finally, Ola came to her and caught her by her shoulders and said, "Julia, stop it." Says, "We baked women do not cry in public." And Julia Tyree said she straightened her face up, and she thought, "Well, I'm doing something that I'm not supposed to be doing." She said she straightened up then and just grieved like Ola was grieving. Oh my goodness. And of course, when the Bate men and all the men from Castellian went off to war, Marcus was left in charge of the Bate estate. And Miss Ola says he hid the silver on numerous occasions when they got word that the Yankees were coming. Okay. So he took care of the farm. And you know, Sumner County lost a lot of men down in the Battle of Shiloh in the northern part of my home state. And when this is history, and you have to laugh at it. It is history. when the white soldiers had made a pact, because it was a bloody, you know, the Battle of Shiloh was bloody. And whichever got back to Castellan was to go around and collect the biracial children and take them to Marcus Bates' house, because they wanted Marcus to raise their children, because Marcus was a relative of theirs, and they depended on Marcus, and that's exactly what they did. They collected, I think Miss Ola said there were 4 mulatto children in Castellan Springs. So they collected those 4 and took them to Marcus Bates' home. He and his wife raised those children. And Miss Ola was such a little devil. She would laugh and say, Velma, and they think until this day that they are related to me. She said, and they are not. They are not. And I won't tell you, one well-known family in Gallatin has a grandmother who was one of those little, well, out in Castellan Springs, they just called them the little white children. So a well-known family, very established here, is a descendant of one of those. And Miss Ola just thought that was funny, that they always were trying to figure out how they were related, because if Miss Ola's father-in-law raised their ancestor, they had to be related, they thought. And Miss Ola enjoyed until the day she died, not telling them. Not telling them. All right, next. That is Nora with her first-born grandchildren, and both of them are teachers in Kansas City, Kansas. Next. And that's her book, of course. Next. And that is one of her students at Union High School in 1944. The House of Seven Gables is what that book report is about. Okay. Julia Dobbins. I think most of you know Julia Dobbins at First Baptist Church. Excellent seamstress. No? Oh, okay. Next. That is she, Nora Bate. You know, she homeschooled Julia Tyree because for whatever reasons, Julia's father did not want her going to public school, so she homeschooled her every day. And Julia Tyree laughed and says, Velma said the other kids were reading See Jane Go and Wrong Sally Run. She said, I was reading Latin. She taught Latin and English, so I'm sure she did have Julia reading Latin. Okay, next. Okay, thank you. Have any of you ever seen or heard of William Kenneth Wilson? Now this is history, have any of you ever heard of the colored drugstore? Raise your hand if you've ever heard of. Okay, very good. Well, this is the owner of the colored drugstore. And that was back when the word colored was just another word. It had meaning, but it was not necessarily negative. It was just history, the way people describe someone else. He was born in Marshall County in a small community named Wilson Hill that I suspect was named for his family. I bet it was, but I don't know that. At any rate, when he finished 8th grade, like in Sumner County, there was no high school for African Americans to attend, so his parents brought him to live with someone in Nashville so that he could attend high school at Pearl High School. And that is where he graduated from, was Pearl High School. Then in 1906, he graduated from the Department of Pharmacy at Meharry College. He left Middle Tennessee and headed over to Chattanooga. And that is where he had his first Wilson Pharmacy for the first 9 years out of medical school. In 1915, he came to Gallatin. I have no reason, no understanding why, but he left Chattanooga and moved to Gallatin. His pharmacy, or the colored drugstore, was in that second two-story building of Dairy Berry's HVAC. Raise your hand if you know where I'm talking about.
Down by Town Creek.
Yes, yes, down by Town Creek. That is where the colored drugstore stood. When he moved here, Dr. Ramsey needed a place to practice, and he needed someplace too, so they went together. Dr. Ramsey used the second floor for his medical practice, and Dr. Wilson opened the pharmacy on the ground floor. In 1923, he married a local girl, Eva Woodson Mayberry. Let's see if we can find her in that hat. There!
This is right to church with me.
Exactly!
Oh, I remember.
Now, Eva was Catholic.
Yeah.
Yes.
Yeah.
They were husband and wives, but
We had figured out how Miss Eve got to be Catholic. But she was good.
when I first moved to Gallatin, she took me to church with her. Oh, yes, she took me to Mass on several occasions because I attended instruction the whole 4 years when I was in college. But when it came time to convert, I just
You chicken died.
I did not. Let's just leave it at that. We'll just leave it at that. I did not convert. But I did go to Mass with her on several occasions. Her husband, Dr. Wilson, was Methodist. He attended Key Stewart down on Blythe Street. Okay, she was the first African-American RN in all of Sumner County. And here she was married to, and of course she graduated from Meharry as well. They had a nursing department, and that's where she graduated. Later, she went back to school to earn her baccalaureate degree in elementary education because she wanted to teach. The two of them were two of the most economically prosperous black people in Sumner County at that time. For one thing, they had no children eating them out of a house and a home. So they did not have to buy clothes, shoes, pay for this, that, and the other. So their money was just stacking up. But they were two of the most generous people you ever wanted to find. At that time, when they were married, Union High had just opened up on the hill next to First Baptist. But did you ever think about the fact that they built a school that opened in 1922 for high schools, grades 1 through 12, and there was no gymnasium? Not only that, there was no football field. So, where were they supposed to play football and basketball? Well, the principal went to the owner of the tobacco warehouse right up on top of the railroad track. It's torn down now, but you know where the tobacco warehouse stood. And he got permission from the owner of the tobacco warehouse. And of course, it was a dirt floor, but that was the home court for Union High School for years. There were no seats for the, naturally in a tobacco warehouse, who would have seats in there? So the school had to furnish seats, and even the school had to furnish its own gold because they had no gold. And that's where Dr. Wilson came. Dr. Wilson and Eva stepped up to the bat and made that possible. And the principal worked with the Colored Fair Association, and that's their name. It's on their printed materials over on Blythe Street, where they have 5 acres. And that was the practice field for football. And there were risers, and that's where people sat if they wanted to sit down. So at any rate, every church, every fraternal organization, every civic organization, professional, knew that the Wilsons were a sure target for a donation, for whatever the cause was. And they gave. Dr. Wilson was especially fond of the football team, and even when his health failed, he would hire someone to drive him to the football games. And whoever his driver was, he would say, okay, now you get out, go tell Professor Harold and the captain that I'm here. And he was so sick, he had to sit in the car. But he wanted them to know, I'm with you, I'm here. So he stayed in Gallatin the remainder of his life. He never went back to Murray County. Okay, our last person is, who is our last person? Oh, I just finished. So I have 5 minutes to spare. Thank you all for
At the library, we'd like to say thank you again for coming, and we hope to see you next time.